Guys, these are my latkes. You've had latkes before, but have you had them like this? That's the question. Because Hanukkah is coming up, this video is about latkes. Latkes are the most traditional thing I can think of that you make Hanukkah. Deep fried. We make it from potatoes, some other people make donuts, but we're talking about potato latkes. These are the ingredients I'm going to be using. Potatoes, and I use floury potatoes. It's very important to use floury potatoes. If you use waxy potatoes, you're going to get a sticky latke on the inside, and we want a nice fluffy inside. I'm going to add some onion, an egg, some flour. This dries the water which some people throw away, which I feel is a shame. If you want to make them gluten-free, you can use potato flakes, which does the same thing, but it'll be less crunchy. So if you're not gluten-free, stick to flour and salt. Many people add pepper. I like to add pepper only when I really want the pepper flavor. Just adding it in because it's there doesn't do it for me. These are my potatoes. I'm going to wash them rather than peel them. I think that the peel is a very healthy part of the potato and we should eat it wherever possible. However, as you know, potatoes grow in some pretty weird stuff. You really have to make sure if you're using the skins to really wash it well. And when I say well, I mean really well. I'm going to scrape them with a sponge and then cut away any bits that don't look appetizing. See, that's something you want to cut away, you don't want to leave that. So you really have to go over your potatoes, look at them, make sure there's nothing there you don't want. Actually, the eyes of potatoes, where they start growing, you really have to cut away because they're semi-poisonous. Now I'm going to grate the potatoes, and I'm going to use the thickest or the biggest holes that I can use. You should also use a sharp grater because the sharper it is, the less juice and less water is going to come off the potatoes and more will stay inside the latke. But use whatever grater you've got on the biggest setting. We want to have bits of potato. We don't want it to turn into a mush. So first thing first, we're going to grate these potatoes. If you'll notice, I'm not using rubber gloves, and there's a reason for that, because it has been discovered by researchers that people who wear rubber gloves while they're cooking are less careful about what they touch than people who are using their bare hands. It's cleaner and more hygienic to wash your hands often rather than to wear a piece of rubber and let that get filthy. Now obviously you could do this with a machine, however I am lazy. And if I do it with the machine, it's a bit quicker in the beginning, but then I have to wash the whole machine. Onion is not strictly necessary to make latkes. Many people make it without. For me, it stays a bit bland if you don't add any at all. So I add, but if you don't like the flavor of onion in your latkes, you just skip it. Or again, we cut off before you use the onion, cut off that bit, because that's the bit that's got delicious farmyard earth on it. Here we're going to use the roughest part of the grater. We don't want actual bits of onion in the latke. We want just the flavor. Half an onion should be about right. Now to this, we're going to add an egg and salt. However, the salt you add in as late as possible because as soon as you add salt, the potatoes are going to start giving off liquid. We want to keep as much of the liquid inside as possible. So for this amount, it's about a kilo of potatoes, I'm going to add at least 1 tablespoon of flour, sometimes 1.5, depending on how wet it becomes. So I'm first going to mix it, then I'm going to add the salt. So as you can see, there's no liquid coming out of it yet. The minute I add the salt, there's going to come a lot. So we avoid that till the last second. I have here around about a tablespoon of salt, just a little bit less. Again, it's to taste, but too little salt is definitely not good. You can't really add salt to a latke after it's cooked. Now the next thing to do is you want to taste it. At this stage, because the potatoes haven't absorbed any salt yet, you want it to taste lightly salty. This is not. So I'm going to add a drop more. Now comes the fun part, because most people are going to take this mixture and drop it into a frying pan with boiling oil. What happens is they have no control over what happens to it the minute it hits the oil, and it splashes everywhere and you get, well, something like a latke. However, because I have a professional kitchen and I want to serve every latke identical and perfect, this is what we do. We form a latke and we put it on a baking tray. Again, I'm using my hands, not rubber gloves, because that's how I prefer it. And by the way, these little shreds that hang out, they're actually why it's called a latke. Latke in Yiddish is little patch, and because of these little bits that hang out, it looks like the threads holding in a not very professional patch together. So that's where the name latke comes from, most likely. As you can see, because I put in the salt late, there's very little juice which has run out relatively. So now these latkes are going to go into the oven at 180 degrees for around 15 minutes, just so that they're set. They don't need to be cooked, but we do want them set that they hold their shape. And now we wait. I am now on exactly 14 minutes. These are looking exactly how I want them to look. It went into the oven a little bit late, and that's why we have a certain amount of leakage, but that's not the end of the world. So now, these have been 14 minutes in the oven. They start to get some little brown bits on it, so we know that they're more or less set. We don't want them cooked, but we do want them set. And now we take them off the tray. If you let them cool, they come off easier. That's not really a big issue. So now I'm heating my oil to 160 degrees, which is roughly the temperature I want. If you don't have a thermometer, if you come here and look from close, if you put in a piece of wood, then you're going to start seeing some bubbles coming off it. So this is a way of making sure that your oil is at the right temperature, even if you don't have a thermometer, because I know not everybody does. But if you put it in before, when it's too cold, the oil, you're going to get very greasy latkes, and we don't want that. Next job, we take the latkes as we have them. These could be from the fridge or freezer. I would rather defrost them if they were frozen, but we just drop them into the hot oil. The smell that comes off this is something outstanding. The whole house is now smelling of deep fried, well, latke smell, which is the smell of Hanukkah, smell of New Year, smell of the festive season we have. When they're nice golden brown, they come out onto a nice piece of kitchen paper so that they drain off excess oil. Guys, these are my latkes. You've had latkes before, but have you had them like this? That's the question.